Welly, 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 well. What have we here? Part, what, 3, 4, whatever this is, of the Leslie saga. And this is the cabinet. I should have taken some before pictures because, yeah, I've sanded the entire finish off just about. I'm down to the detail work. Um, the original finish was scarred in a bunch of places, and plus it was just flaking off and really in rough shape. So a few days of concerted effort with some sandpaper and elbow grease and the occasional use of the electric sander. It is now almost ready for staining. Now it's interesting. I just thought I would show you that on the original finish, these corners were stained to match this wood, and so were this. I mean, this whole thing was matched, and you can see when you sand it back, those softwood corners come out completely white once you sand the stain off, and the wood, on the other hand, the grain is still pretty dark. So the thing is going to have to be stained fairly dark in order not to kind of have some sort of two-tone effect. A word to the wise: when you're doing this, it's going to take you forever to sand out these louvers. Man, that my fingers are still hurting from that. And if you use, well, anything, but especially if you use a machine sander, be real careful at the edges, especially right here near the edges of the louvers. You can burn through the veneer pretty easy. The veneer was actually already very, very thin right here compared to the other places, and it didn't take much at all to just completely burn through. So that'll have to be stained to match. And of course, you get to the edges where the veneer is cracking up, so you kind of, unfortunately, that piece there was long gone by the time I got here, but another similar such piece was still there and was just loose and flaking up, so I glued it back down. So go around the edges of these where the veneer has no binding on it, and it's just, that's what happens to it. And if you can find any spots where it's loose, use a razor blade or something and slide some wood glue underneath there and clamp it down. Yeah, that's kind of it for that. Inside, everything's pretty okay. The one thing I'm not happy about is the condition of the bottom. Let's see if I can spin it around and get it here in the light. There we go. As we can see, this thing took some water damage at some point. If it weren't for the fact that it's got this routed out pocket in it here for the lower rotor bearing, I would probably just replace this, but my router's busted right now. Speaking of bearings, the bearing seized up on my router. And part of what happened with this water damage is that the metal casters, the wood kind of got soft and the metal casters just pushed right up, kind of almost flush with the wood. So we're going to have to do something about the feet on this thing. And I'm probably going to put some really thick black deck paint on this bottom after giving it a light sand. It's still structurally okay, not great. But, this thing isn't going to be toured anymore, so it's just going to be sitting in a home, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Around here, around the edges and the binding, you can see these little finish nails that were put in. These are now too close to rotten areas to be of much use, so I'm going to have to get some glue in there and clamp these things down and kind of try to make it so that there's no rattles or anything, or any obvious gaps in the corners or anything like that. But all said and done, this is going to be and look and sound probably much nicer than it ever did before. Well, not than it ever did, but than it has certainly within the last 30 years. Anyway, more updates when the amp parts and various other components in the new speaker comes in. I get this thing finished and stained and finished, and and we'll start putting it back together. And when we do that, we'll start talking about how everything functions inside there as we reassemble. All right, stay tuned, my legions of 3 or 4 YouTube followers.